Iran is bleeding $435 million every single day. Not from bombs, not from missiles, from silence. The silence of tankers that never arrive, oil that goes nowhere, and a regime watching its own financial foundation crack beneath its feet. This is not a story about weapons. This is a story about arithmetic. And the arithmetic is dismantling the Islamic Republic faster than any military force on earth ever could. The numbers confirmed by multiple American and European analysts are public, precise, and brutal. Every 24 hours the American naval blockade holds, Iran loses $435 million in foreign currency it will never recover. Not a projected estimate, a verified figure, calculated from Iran's pre-war export volumes and the current market price of crude oil. In 1 week, that is over $3 billion gone. In 1 month, it exceeds $13 billion. For context, Iran's entire annual defense budget before the war was approximately $10 billion. The blockade is costing Iran more than its entire military budget every single month, and every dollar of that loss is permanent. But the daily revenue figure, devastating as it is only the surface of the problem. Beneath it is a structural crisis accelerating toward a hard physical deadline, and that deadline is measured in days, not months. Iran cannot export its oil. That is the blockade's central achievement. But oil production does not stop simply because exports stop. The fields keep pumping, the crude keeps flowing, and it has to go somewhere. The somewhere is Iran's onshore storage infrastructure, the tank farms and terminals scattered across the country where crude oil sits before it is loaded onto export tankers. The total capacity of that storage network is approximately 50 to 55 million barrels. That sounds enormous. It is not nearly enough. Before the blockade began, Iran was exporting approximately 1.4 million barrels of crude oil per day. Under the blockade, that number has been reduced to nearly zero. Every barrel that would have left on a tanker is now going into storage instead, filling tanks that were never designed to absorb the full output of Iran's oil fields indefinitely. As of the most recent intelligence assessments available to American analysts, approximately 60% of Iran's onshore storage capacity is already occupied. The remaining empty space is estimated at 20 to 22 million barrels. At current production rates, that space will be completely full in 13 to 16 days. 13 to 16 days. That is the number. That is the countdown running silently in the background of every diplomatic conversation, every ceasefire negotiation, every midnight call between Tehran and Islamabad and Washington. And almost nobody on American television is putting that number on screen. When the storage tanks reach capacity, Iran faces a choice with no good option. The first path is to keep pumping oil into a system with no room left, which is physically impossible and environmentally catastrophic. The second path is to shut down the oil fields entirely. Shutting down an oil field is not a reversible decision made lightly. It is not like switching off a machine and switching it back on the following morning. It is a complex engineering operation that takes days or weeks to execute safely. Restarting oil fields after a forced shutdown takes weeks or months. In some cases, emergency shutdowns cause permanent reservoir damage that reduces a field's productive capacity for years into the future. Iran's oil fields, some of which have been in continuous operation since the 1950s and 1960s, are not engineered for this kind of emergency cycling. They were designed for sustained, stable production across decades, not for emergency shutdowns triggered by a naval blockade. Forcing them into a full stop to manage storage overflow is precisely the kind of industrial shock they are least equipped to absorb. The moment Iran shuts down its oil fields, the regime's only meaningful source of foreign currency stops generating money entirely, not partially, not at a reduced rate, entirely. The flow of dollars and euros that funds everything from military salaries to government food subsidies to the parallel economy run by the Revolutionary Guard stops at the source. Iran's government runs on oil revenue. This is not a debatable point. It is the structural reality of the Islamic Republic's economic architecture since 1979. Oil exports account for the overwhelming majority of Iran's foreign currency earnings. When those earnings fall to zero, the financial architecture of the entire regime begins to collapse from the inside. And that collapse accelerates week by week. This is the mechanism Washington designed when the blockade strategy was built. This is not a kinetic military operation. It is an economic siege with a geometric pressure curve, and that curve is now approaching its steepest, most critical point. To understand why the economic pressure alone is not yet producing a resolution, it is necessary to understand what is happening inside the Iranian government at the exact moment when unified, decisive leadership is most urgently required. The supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has not been seen in public for more than 7 weeks. He was wounded on the first day of the war. His face is reportedly disfigured. He communicates only through audio conferences broadcast to select officials. The man who is supposed to be the singular, final decision-making authority of the Islamic Republic is physically incapacitated and institutionally isolated at the precise moment in history when Iran needs a functioning command structure more than at any other point since the revolution. Into that vacuum have stepped 3 competing power centers, each pulling the Iranian government in a different direction, each unwilling to yield authority to the others, and none of them holding enough institutional power to impose a resolution alone. The Foreign Ministry, led by Abbas Araghchi, understands the arithmetic. His team sees the storage charts. His analysts have the production data. They know the countdown is real, and they know it is almost over. The Foreign Ministry is working against the clock to make a deal before the oil fields shut down and the last leverage Iran holds disappears. The Parliament, led by Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, represents the hardline political establishment. Ghalibaf and his faction are not willing to accept any agreement that leaves the American naval blockade in place as a precondition. In their calculation, accepting terms under visible economic duress signals permanent weakness. Weakness that every adversary Iran faces, not just Washington, will exploit for decades. And then there is the Revolutionary Guard. The Guard controls the Navy. The Guard controls the missile arsenal. The Guard commands the submarine fleet, the fast attack boat squadrons, and the mine networks distributed across the Strait of Hormuz. And the Guard has made its institutional position absolutely clear. No deal, no concessions, no recognition of American authority over Iranian sovereign decisions. For the Revolutionary Guard, the war is not a catastrophe to be ended. The war is the active mechanism of their power. In wartime, every civilian institution in Iran is legally and practically subordinate to the security apparatus. The elected parliament, the foreign ministry, the civilian bureaucracy, All of them answer to the Guard when the nation is under existential threat. The moment the war ends and a real agreement is signed, the Guard reverts to being a military institution under nominal civilian oversight. Their grip on Iran's domestic economy, on the smuggling networks that move goods under the sanctions architecture, on the black market foreign currency flows that fund their parallel power structure, all of it weakens the moment peace normalizes Iran's external relationships. So the institution that has the most to lose from any peace agreement is the same institution that holds the physical capacity to prevent one. That is the structural trap Iran has been building for itself across 45 years of political architecture designed around permanent external threat. The world watched this trap close in real time on April 17th. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, appeared before cameras and formally announced that the Strait of Hormuz was open for the duration of the ceasefire in Lebanon. Oil markets crashed 11% in under 3 hours. The American stock market hit an all-time record high. The entire global investment community concluded the war was effectively over. 6 hours later, Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf took his own microphone and canceled Araghchi's announcement completely. The Revolutionary Guard issued a reinforcing statement within minutes. The strait was closed again. The agreement was scrapped. $6 trillion in global asset value swung violently in one direction and then started reversing before the American trading day had even ended. That reversal was not a miscommunication. It was not a diplomatic misunderstanding to be clarified in a follow-up statement. It was public, visible proof that Iran's decision-making structure has fractured past the point of functional governance. The foreign minister made a commitment he did not have the authority to make because the people who actually control the physical infrastructure, the submarines, the mines, the fast attack boats, had not agreed to honor it. He was making promises to the world that the Revolutionary Guard had already decided to break, and the world found out within the same news cycle. Now bring the economic countdown back into this picture and hold both realities at the same time. The tanks are filling toward capacity. The deadline sits somewhere between 13 and 16 days from the moment the storage assessments were made. The foreign minister is working to negotiate an exit and being overruled by the Guard. The supreme leader cannot impose a decision on anyone. The ceasefire framework that was supposed to create diplomatic space just collapsed along with the announcement tied to it. Washington understands the pressure is working. The blockade is performing exactly as its architects designed. Iran's economy is not approaching a crisis over the next fiscal quarter. It is approaching a hard physical wall within the next 2 weeks. The question now being debated in every room between the Pentagon and the State Department is whether to hold maximum pressure until the Iranian system breaks under its own internal weight, or to offer Iran a face-saving exit pathway before the situation becomes so desperate that the Guard makes an irreversible decision. Because the other side of this arithmetic cannot be safely set aside. A regime that is days away from being forced to shut down its oil fields is a regime approaching the point where it has almost nothing left to preserve. The Revolutionary Guard has 2,000 ballistic missiles. It has thousands of naval mines distributed across the Strait of Hormuz. It has trained combat divers who have spent decades practicing exactly the kind of underwater infrastructure sabotage that no surface navy in the world can fully defend against. It has the physical capability to make the Strait of Hormuz functionally unusable for everyone, including Iran itself, if the alternative is watching the regime's financial architecture dissolve publicly and permanently. The economic siege, designed to end the war, could also be the mechanism that triggers its most destructive phase. Not because Iran is approaching this from strength, but because Iran is losing badly enough, fast enough, that the people in physical control of its weapons are moving toward the threshold where they have nothing left to protect and everything left to detonate. Pakistan's army chief has been flying between Tehran and Washington for weeks, carrying frameworks and proposed exit ramps. The American position is that the blockade remains in place until Iran verifiably commits to suspending its nuclear program and withdrawing material support from regional proxy forces. The Iranian Foreign Ministry's position is that the blockade must end before any substantive negotiation can begin. Those two positions have not moved toward each other in 3 weeks of exhausting shuttle diplomacy, and the arithmetic is not pausing to let the diplomacy find its pace. The tanks keep filling. The countdown keeps running. The $435 million disappears from Iran's foreign currency reserves every single day, and no diplomatic meeting has yet produced the agreement that stops the clock. The most systematically designed economic weapon in the history of Middle Eastern conflict is operating exactly as its architects intended. The pressure is real. The deadline is real. The fracture inside the Iranian government is real and visible to anyone watching. The only question that remains, the question every intelligence analyst and every diplomat working this crisis is trying to answer right now, is whether the weight of $435 million per day, compounding into billions per month, collapsing onto a government already breaking under its own internal contradictions, will produce a deal before it produces a catastrophe. The countdown is not a metaphor. The tanks are real. The math is exact. And somewhere inside Tehran, the clock is ticking toward a decision that will determine not just the outcome of this war, but the shape of the Middle East for the next generation.